Hey, do you guys want to talk about the MBOX? I just wanted to broadcast my feelings about the Avid MBOX Studio because it's been a little bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, it's a fantastic piece of hardware. Definitely a lot of care and attention went into this. Avid really outdid themselves with this, I think, but there is one fundamental flaw and a few quirks that means I probably won't have it in my setup for much longer. Now, that doesn't mean I won't recommend this to a lot of you out there. A lot of your setups, I think, would benefit from the features that it brings. But before we get into that, I just wanted to say that I'm a new creator into this space. This is my first video, so I'd really appreciate it if you gave me a follow. I plan to be posting a lot of audio tips, discussions, thoughts, and opinions that I think would be really helpful. So if you could drop me a follow, that'd be awesome. Now let's rewind a little bit. Avid is definitely a contentious subject within the audio community. For one, it's been the forefront of professional circuits for a very long time, not only in record production with recording, mixing, and mastering, but also in cinema, post-production, composition. Avid has been the predominant software that most people have been using. That's not to say that Avid doesn't have its detractors. There's a very vocal, passionate community that has legitimate grievances against the company. People out there that won't even touch their hardware or software, never had any experiences with them, but have only heard bad things on forums. And others are professionals, their own user base that wants the company to address its long-standing issues. As far as Pro Tools, there's plenty of alternatives, plenty of companies offering fantastic pieces of software that can be used at a professional level. But the fact is, among professional record producers, Pro Tools is still the preferred software of choice. So I understand the perspective. However, I want to judge this interface not based on their history, but more so based on its merit. So let's get into the review. The Avid MBOX Studio came out in November of 2022. It was an evolution of the original MBOX that came out 20 years prior. And that was actually pretty revolutionary at the time for both the educational space and the home studio space. As a matter of fact, when I was a teenager in high school, I worked with a drummer who had an MBOX in his home studio. But let's switch it back to the Avid MBOX Studio. This is a USB 2.0 interface, and it is powered by an external power supply, so no USB bus power here. Now, as far as inputs, there's no shortage of them here. Let's focus on just the microphone inputs. There's a total of 4 of them, 2 on the front and 2 on the back of the interface. There's 60 dB of clean gain on tap here, with a 10 dB pad just in case you're recording loud sources. Very nice that they added that. But what's most interesting, switchable input impedances per channel. Now, if you're not familiar with switchable impedances, it actually does a lot to affect the tone of your microphones, particularly if you're using dynamic mics. You can fine tune them to make your drums sound fatter or punchier, your bass sound warmer, or if you have a particularly harsh vocal or harsh mic, it can kind of help dull it out or open it up a little bit more. Really, really cool. Now, this feature in particular is a really strong point of the Avid MBOX, but I will say that don't expect these preamps to be some magic mojo. It's not a 1073 preamp. It's not an API. It's very clean, but it does its job well, and it remains adaptable, flexible, great for home studios. If you guys are curious on how the MBOX Studio's preamps or converters sound, Help Me Devon is a fantastic YouTube channel, does really in-depth, slick stuff. He did a great review on this 3 years ago where he compared it up against a couple other interfaces, including the MBOX Carbon, which is their higher suite, and the Prism Sound, which is really high-end converters. I strongly recommend checking that out. He also has a great podcast where they talk about gear and gear news. Great creators, and give him a follow. Now, as far as instrument inputs, there's actually a set of them in the front. You can switch it to instrument and be able to plug in an electric guitar, bass, acoustic guitar, etc. And they don't sound that bad. It also has 2 additional line inputs as well as an FX send and return. However, that return you can definitely use as another set of line inputs, bringing up the total line inputs up to 4. Now, as far as onboard outputs, we'll get to the expansions later. There's 2 sets in the back, one for your main monitors and another for a second set of monitors. Now, you can switch between these 2, which is super cool, and that's a really neat feature. However, if you don't have a second set of monitors, you can use these outputs for something else. Now, that could be for different Q mix to send to a headphone output, or maybe you have some outboard gear that you like to send some outputs to. As far as headphone outputs, there's two in the front, each with its own separate volume control, which is really neat. Now, what you hear in each headphone can be completely different. Using the Avid MBOX control software, you can directly monitor any input, any microphone, any line in, or anything on the ADAT or SPDIF, but more on that later, which means you can have a separate mix for your headphones as an engineer and a separate mix for the artist on the second pair. Now, I've saved the most interesting output for last. It's the one located directly in front of the interface. It's actually a reamp output. Now, some of you might know what that means, but others may not. Reamping is the practice of essentially recording guitar or bass directly into your interface, a dry signal without an amp, without any pedals, and essentially taking that dry signal and then sending it through an output, a specific specialized output that matches the impedances that a guitar amp or a guitar pedal operate nominally at. Now, using already recorded guitar or bass tracks is just one way that you can use this output. You can also use it in real time. While you're recording, you can monitor an input and send it back out through that reamp output. And another technique that I don't think is utilized enough is reamping other instruments, sending other signals, not guitar signals, maybe vocals, maybe synths, maybe drums through guitar pedals, using that reamp output and then sending it back in the interface as a cool effect that you can blend in parallel. So already you're starting to see how this is a really useful tool for an engineer, even at a professional level. But let's continue. I didn't want to forget the last pair of onboard inputs and outputs. They're pretty interesting. They're Bluetooth. So you have a Bluetooth input, which I think is really handy. If you want music from your phone or tablet to be transmitted to your audio interface, and you can play them out of your monitors. You can play them out of headphones. That's pretty cool. Maybe you want a little bit of background music to set the mood when you're with the client, or maybe your client has like a rough mix they want to show you, and you can just click a button and they can pair with your interface. Maybe they have like a reference mix that they might aspire to kind of want to sound like. That's super cool. Now, the weird one is definitely the Bluetooth outputs. I don't see a lot of use for these. Essentially, what this means is you can play audio from your audio interface into a Bluetooth device, like wireless headphones, like your car, which on paper sounds cool, but you have to realize that Bluetooth is a protocol that diminishes your audio quality, and it's not great for referencing. Maybe you can check your mix in your car, but again, the loss in audio quality means you're not referencing accurately. And especially for the car, I found the transmission range on this to be about 10 feet, sometimes less. So I don't see much use for this. Now, if you're looking to expand the number of inputs and outputs you have with your MBOX Studio, you're given a couple of options. There is ADAT in and out, which allows you to expand up to 8 channels, inputs and outputs, if you have a unit like I have with my Focusrite Octopre. But it also has SPDIF input and out, but that's a little trickier. There's not a whole lot of units that still have the SPDIF connections, which allow you to expand your interface with an additional 2 inputs and 2 outputs. I bought an Art MPA Digital specifically for this. It is an inexpensive tube microphone preamp, but to my knowledge, there's not a whole lot of other units. And I do know that there's really high-end converters like the Burl B2 Bomber that's, several $1,000s if you want to be able to get really great reference quality converters. Just giving you a little piece of advice on what the market has right now. Now I'm switching to my phone so you can kind of see the faceplate of the Avid MBOX Studio, and I'm going to kind of walk you through it. Let's start with the input section, which actually starts from here to the left. So this knob controls the gain on whatever channel you have selected. Let me put this on channel 2. And then these buttons right here, phantom power for whatever channel you have selected. This, if you press and hold it, will be your Bluetooth input. This will link 2 channels together so you can see. If I put on channel 1 and I hit link, for example, boop, and now it linked. Perfect. Now for input, you can actually change it, whether you want a mic, line, or instrument. And then here is the interesting part, is where you can check your input impedance and select different impedances. Each color is a different impedance, which is cool. And then here is your switchable 10 dB pad for that selected channel. Now let's discuss the right side of the interface, which is the output section. This is the wheel to affect the volume level of your monitor. If you press it, you can switch to secondary monitors, and blacked out, that's your SPDIF output, and then another blacked out icon, that's your Bluetooth output. But let's go back to main. If you hit this link button, this will actually control the volume for all the outputs here. Really cool. This is the Bluetooth output button. You hold it, you can pair stuff. This switches your output to mono, which means you can mono check your mix. Super cool. This mutes the monitor that you currently have selected. This dims it, which lowers it by a certain amount of dB, which means if you just like need to talk over a song, that's really cool. And then this is the talkback button. There's a built-in talkback microphone, and if you hit this, you will be able to transmit whatever's being said into this microphone to whatever output. So ideally, this means that you can talk to your client if they're in another room. Super cool. And now let's move on to the middle part. This button right here at the top, that actually opens and closes the Avid MBOX control software. We'll get into that in a little bit. This is actually a guitar tuner. So if you have it pressed right here, as you can see, it's already starting to go. And these 4 buttons are a little interesting. With the Avid control software, they can be custom mapped to parameters to be able to affect things. I believe they have like 30 or 40 different parameters that you can hit on or off with, like mute, solo, etc. Unfortunately, they can't be mapped to any DAW. They don't have any MIDI mapping capabilities, so it does fall short there. Okay, now we're in software land. I like to call this kind of the poor man's RME in reference to Total Mix, but this is kind of Avid's interpretation on it. So I'm going to walk you through this a little bit. It's pretty interesting what they have going on under the hood here to be able to control the Avid MBOX. So let's start with the bottom. This right here is all your outputs, your main, your secondary monitor / Bluetooth output. As you can see, it shares headphone 1 and 2, SPDIF, the 2-line outputs in the back, and then all the ADAT outputs. Now, whenever you have something highlighted, you can send anything up top here. If you push this fader up, you are now sending it. You saw that meter move. You are not sending it to that highlighted output, which is pretty cool. There's a little trim knob, a little volume knob, and the mute button right there. But it's pretty interesting. So let's move on to this top row here. This is all your hardware inputs. So as you can see, the first 4 are the mic / line, and then the first 2 are mic / line / instrument, because these are the 2 in the front. Then you have your line outputs, the additional 4 in the back, your Bluetooth input, and so on, your SPDIF, your ADAT, and even your talkback. So you're pretty much selecting what you want. You can do direct input monitoring and just send an input directly into an output, which is pretty cool. Now, I don't want to talk about this middle part yet because it's going to cause me much grief. But let's go to this left side. So if you have a channel selected up top, you can actually see there's some advanced settings that you can set. You can switch out what kind of input it is, mic, line, or instrument. Turn on and off phantom power here from the software. You don't have to use the buttons on the interface. You can switch up the impedances, the pad, and then here's a couple of additional things. There's a high pass filter here, HPF. There's a soft limiter here to kind of not let it peak as hard if you go into clipping. There's a polarity switch there, and then you can even pan it here or here. It affects the same thing. If you're sending it to an output, you can kind of pan it where you want it to be in that stereo field. Now, if we go down here, there's actually an EQ. So this is actually pretty neat. If you're like maybe doing like streaming or something where you want to kind of have like a pre-EQ, I probably wouldn't use this for recording, but this is cool that you can kind of sculpt a sound on the way in. And this EQ to DAW button is pretty much saying when you have this engaged, it's going to print. It's going to record using this EQ on the signal, and it's going to affect it when you hit record on your DAW. If you don't have it selected, you will hear it in your monitors with this EQ, but it will not record with this EQ engaged. A pretty cool little 4-band EQ. Now, this purple fader is interesting. Like I said, we have this little green box, this channel selected. If you push this, this is essentially making a send to this Avid effects. And what Avid effects is essentially a little effects engine where you can add delay and reverb. Kind of cool. I never really use it. But still, I guess kind of cool. If we go to this bottom left here, this is your monitor section, and you pretty much can mono, mute, control your volume, essentially do everything that you can do on the interface with the buttons and the knob, but do it here with your mouse if you want to, which I guess is pretty cool. And here you can actually set your dim, like how loud you want that dim to be and how loud you want that talk button. And let's not forget the top panel right here. Let's start from the left. So as you can see, there's a preset menu where you can save your own user presets here. Essentially, it'll save what you have things routed and panned and the controls that you have set up. So as you can see, I have one here for streaming, one here for subbing to my Yamaha console. So that's pretty cool. Moving along, you can turn on advanced mix mode and some additional advanced features, mirror main to SPDIF, stuff like that, group all monitor mixers, stuff like that. So, and then here, these 4 colored circles, those are actually what you're mapping to the colored buttons on the top of the interface. You can even set the color, and then what happens when you press that button. Do you mute the selected channel? Do you solo it? Do you go through presets? Do you engage the EQ for whatever you have that set with the Avid MBOX control software? Now remember, you can't control anything from your DAW. You just control what's going on in this software here for the MBOX. And then you can even do another action if you press and hold it, which is pretty cool. I mean, I don't get that much use out of it. I'll usually put it to mute. And then I'll essentially have all these faders up to my outputs. So it'll unmute it so I can monitor something in like my headphones or speakers or what have you. Anyway, moving right along. There's actually, I forgot to mention on the back of this interface, something I never use. There's input for an expression pedal and a switch. And essentially you can map that to do something. You see, you can map that for talkback, monitor, dim, mute, to engage the tuner, and stuff like that. And like I said, I never use it. And then there's this loop back, which, if enabled, will essentially send your 7/8 from your DAW directly to your 7/8 in inputs, and that'll essentially be your loopback channel. I'll use this sometimes for streaming. It's very handy. Now let's discuss this middle section. Really? Did you really need to do this, Avid? I'm talking to Avid right now. You almost pulled it off. You almost made a near perfect interface in terms of features. You packed it full of so many things, but you didn't stick the landing. You had to put in this one fundamental flaw. This is the reason I'm selling my interface. I'm going to let my bias come out here for a little bit. Avid can be very frustrating to work with. Even the pros will tell you that. This was just such a oversight. Like, how did you not think that this would have been an issue? And this just keeps it from not being an ideal interface for my particular setup. But let me explain why. Let's go back to software land. Okay, let's talk about it. This middle section is your software input. This is essentially what's coming out of your DAW, the outputs that you can send from your DAW. Now, 1 and 2 are your master left and right, essentially. This is what my computer sound is going through, which is why you can see it bouncing up and down. This is my voice right now. Post converters and stuff. So that means it only effectively gives you 6 to work with if you want to send other outputs from your DAW, other sends from your DAW. Which means if you have analog hardware, if you have a hybrid workflow, you're severely limited. And then on top of that, like if you want a headphone mix, you're also severely limited. You only have 6 outputs. You know, that's 3 headphone mixes that you have to work with. You have 8 possible DAW outputs and 20 possible hardware outputs to be able to map that to. Now, there's other interfaces that have like these, they call them Q mixes for the most part. But here's the thing. They give you the option to bypass this and just select the output you want to send your DAW outputs to. Select the hardware output, and then you can send whatever you want from your DAW to that by selecting ADAT 1 or headphone 1 or whatever. I have a small format console. I have a hardware EQ. I have 3 different hardware compressors. I plan to get 500 series in the future. I'm currently doing analog summing. This is completely unusable for analog summing. This is severely hindered if you want to use analog hardware into your setup. It's so baffling. A simple software oversight ruined this interface for me. And that's not the only issue with the MBOX Studio. For one, there is a calculated delay using the MBOX control software. You could look it up on a Sound on Sound magazine article when they went into their review of the Avid MBOX Studio. There's also the fact that Avid is no longer selling this interface. You can only find it on the used market. And per Avid's policy, this is ending its life cycle. I believe it's only going to be supported for about another 3 years as of time of recording this, which is in March of 2026. So the writing's on the wall for this interface. And I will say the drivers, I don't think have been updated in about a year. And considering that Windows 11 just recently come out, I don't see that that's boding very well for the interface in terms of performance, and drivers are usually pretty important. Besides that, I will say you have to size it up with the other stuff at the market at this price range. When this interface came out, it was $899, I believe. It was a really high-end interface for the time. So it's jam-packed full of features. Sure, you can only find the MBOX Studio in the used market, but you can find it for as low as $300 sometimes, $350 at times. It's very inexpensive. And when you see the competition that it's up against a lot of 2-channel interfaces. It's not up against interfaces that have a built-in talkback microphone, that have switchable input impedances on the mic channels. It's not up against interfaces that I only know of a few that have optical expansion from there. It's really not up against much. A lot of those interfaces don't have built-in 10 dB pads. There's a lot of features that are packed into this little box. A lot of useful ones. None of them, I don't think, have any reamp. There might be one specialized for guitar. I know the IK multimedia interface might have a built-in, but that's not a feature you'll find in the Focusrite Scarlett, in the Universal Audio Volt, in the SSL2. Like, none of those interfaces are even close to this. This is why I would recommend it to almost anybody's setup. Now, if you have a hybrid studio, if you want to use, a console or summing mixer, or maybe you have a lot of analog hardware, 500 series, maybe this isn't the best interface for you. I know I have to do some workarounds to integrate it into my setup, which I feel like is modest. But truth be told, a lot of people are going to find a lot of use out of this. It's jam-packed full of features. So that's the final verdict, essentially, is buy one. Unless you're in my very specific lane, this is the interface to get. The closest interface comparable to this one, with as much features as it has, or in significantly better quality, is easily 3 times the price. So this is the steal of the century. Just keep in mind that it is end of life, so you are going to have to replace it at some point, probably 3 or 4 years down the line. But most people end up having to replace their audio interfaces with the times anyway. So enjoy it. It's jam-packed full of features, lots of possibilities, lots of interesting things going on. Just don't upgrade your operating software. Enjoy the ride, folks. Well, thank you so much for watching my video, guys. I actually worked pretty hard on this one, really went in depth, kind of did a little tutorial there, but I really wanted you to understand all the facets of what makes the Avid MBOX Studio a really great piece of hardware, and specifically why it's not going to be in my setup for much longer. But what did you guys think? What do you guys think of Avid? What do you guys think of the hardware? What do you guys think about its strengths and limitations? Would you guys buy one? I want to hear what you guys have to say, not just for the engagement, because I really like starting discussions. You should see me. I'm on internet forums all the time, helping out people with audio questions and stuff like that. So please, feel free to engage with my channel. Like I said, I'm a brand new creator. If you could follow me, it'd mean a lot to me. You know, I'm just getting started here. This is my first video. And if there's any other equipment that you guys are curious about or concepts you guys are curious about, I really want to start doing other videos on techniques, concepts, you know, tips and tricks. Want to do a lot of discussions and takes, just because I have a lot of collective experience myself in the world of audio. And I hope to make another video for you guys soon.